Welcome, everybody, to the show. Happy Friday. You made it to the weekend. Congratulations. Good for you. We're counting it. I mean, if you're listening, maybe you have a couple hours work. It's okay. You can just kind of cruise to the end of it. We're not going to tell anybody. My name is Shawn. The man on my right needs no introduction. I'm going to do it anyway. It's the one and only Sandy Clough. Welcome to Sandy and Shawn. Danny Bailey making everything work and everything you can see. So thanks to Danny for putting it all together. Sandy, the Denver Broncos ended minicamp a little bit early. Minicamp itself ended yesterday like it was expected to, but no practices. Sean Payton decided to go ahead and move away from that early on in the day. And it's kind of funny as these discussions around the NFL about maybe changing the way the offseason functions. It struck me yesterday about the idea that I think the only people that really look at these things and think that it's really critical to what you'll see when the season starts are probably still maybe the hyper macho media types that figure if you're not spending every waking moment on football, you'll be bad at football and you deserve to lose. Even NFL coaches don't believe that. Sauce Gardner pushed back in New York about Aaron Rodgers missing camp, suggesting it's like if you think the guy that's future Hall of Famer and played in the league this long, it's going to matter that he misses 3 games. I don't know what to tell you. He's right. Sean Payton, if he felt that they were in a good spot, which he said they were in a good spot, was absolutely right for moving on from it. I think at a certain point in time, right, especially when you're on a franchise that's been down for a long time, sometimes the carrot works better than the stick.
Well, I think even for old school coaches now, they look at the off season, and yes, compared to what it was like 13 years ago before the CBA restricted off-season work, yes, they have fewer practices, but you're not going to make or break a season during OTAs or mandatory camps.
Not at all.
They're not season making or season breaking unless there are injuries, and sometimes there are in OTAs more frequently because there's only one mandatory minicamp, and it lasts 3 days or in many cases, not even 3 days, too. Sean Payton is not the first coach.
Oh, no.
Even this year to shorten minicamp by a day. And in the past, even Sean Payton had field days in New Orleans with teams that were older than this one. I don't know that it's been established yet, but I'm guessing that this is one of, if not the youngest teams he's ever coached. And that is apparently meaningful to him because he's talked about it quite a bit. And maybe it's the only tangibly positive evidence we have that the Broncos can be moving in the right direction in 2024, even if their record over last year does not improve.
That part is what's kind of interesting, right? The idea that they can still be moving in the right direction if they don't necessarily improve in the record. And obviously that's a big part for Payton's career. Payton has never finished a season more than 2 games under 500. Now he's done that 4 times. He finished 7-9, 4 times with the Saints. But with the 8-9 record with the Broncos last year, he's never finished worse than 2 games under 500. That's something that I think is going to be challenged this year. But oddly, it seems as if Sean Payton seems surprisingly chill with that possibility. Maybe he doesn't believe it. Maybe things have changed, but I think the idea of now rotating this team around, changing up the roster, having to deal with the dead cap expense of moving on from Russell Wilson and drafting your guy in Bo Nix, he seems far more comfortable with the reality of the Denver Broncos situation in year 2. And it might be exactly what you're discussing. He knows you might have to take a step back or two to take the leap forward.
He's never had to develop, with the possible exception of early years in New Orleans, he's never had to develop a young team. And certainly as a head coach, has never had to develop a young quarterback.
No.
I mean, he did wonders for Drew Brees' career, make no mistake. But Drew Brees, when healthy, was a pretty good quarterback in San Diego with the Chargers before he injured his shoulder and before most every team in the league had in some form or fashion, doubts about his ability to play again as well as he had prior to the shoulder injury. So I think this is for a 60-year-old who's been around and who will have that Super Bowl title on his record, never to be expunged from that record.
Right.
He looks at it at age 60 as somewhat refreshing and maybe inspiring and challenging at the same time, because it's not a chance he's frequently had in the past. And I think Sean Payton, after Bountygate, had to change a little bit. That's an experience that he went through, from all we can gather, an experience of his own making, even though he was not necessarily a direct participant. He was the head coach, and his defensive coordinator was the one involved in setting bounties for removing certain players from action. But I think the pressure was on. And some of those 7 and 9 seasons, if not all of them, came after Bountygate.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to kind of
row.
reestablish himself. And I think that idea peaked in that 2018 season with New Orleans. When they got to the championship game, they had home field advantage. They had the Rams beat, apparently, at the end of the game, if not for an official's no call.
Right.
And the Rams went on to win, play the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And remember, this is the last Patriot team that won a Super Bowl, one of the oldest, probably the oldest of New England Super Bowl championship teams. And I'm sure Sean Payton looks back on that and said, that should have been our title. We should, at least we should have been in the game. And considering the way the game went, it was 13-3. Probably he felt New Orleans could have done better than 3 points going up against New England at that point. But I think this is another challenge for him. And last year, he inherited somebody else's team. And he never for a second let us forget about that.
No, you're exactly right. And that means that some of this comes with a rookie class of now the second that he's been able to stack together, that he's been behind. I realize George Payton is the GM, but Sean Payton is the guy that calls the shots in the football world. That's not new. Had a chance to talk a little bit about that rookie class, another one of the youth movement the Denver Broncos are moving on right now.
I was encouraged after the draft because with each of these selections, it doesn't always fall this way. But after Bo, we're then in the 3rd round taking a player. Ellis, we had a 2nd round grade on. Then we get to the 4th round, we have a 2nd round grade on Troy. The 5th round, we have 2 3rd round grades on the runner Estime and Abrams Drain and so on. And even to our 7th rounders. And so that doesn't always happen. Obviously, it can't happen if you don't have a lot of picks, but we were close to our normal number of picks again. And then, the validation, they belong. You get to see the early first impressions, and then we hold reservation till, we get the pads. But I was encouraged with this class.
The idea of moving to youth, too, is really interesting because you talk about the idea for Sean Payton, and this really isn't what he's known for doing. Working with a youthful team, coaching young guys up. It isn't. And it seemed that oddly, he had an opportunity before the end of minicamp, and he sounded a little bit reflective. You talked about the way his coaching history had gone, those 3 7 and 9 seasons following Bountygate, and then 10-win seasons stacked back to back to back to back. The coaching journey that he's taken, he had an opportunity to get a little bit reflective on it as well.
There's probably a little bit of that first year where you're pissing on all the trees. And I'm probably guilty of that. But I think it's the thing. Look, I got into coaching and teaching with the idea that I was going to be a college coach, hopefully maybe in the Big Ten. And then this career is interesting. It'll take you places that maybe you didn't expect to. And I've always, when young coaches will ask, you always talk about being present, where you're at, where your feet are at. And then the other stuff kind of takes care of itself. And that, I would say, happened with me quite a bit. And so you the reward of seeing someone develop and accomplish and then gain confidence, the reward of that constantly comes with new players, with veteran players, and it's kind of addictive.
Remember last year when Sean Payton said publicly that he had told Russell Wilson, "You're not running for political office. Let's get to work." Because that's kind of what Russell Wilson had been doing in 2022. He was running a campaign of sorts as if he were running for something or running from something. And last year it was Sean Payton who was, as he suggested there, not so delicately,
Right.
pissing on all the trees. And that, I don't know if that's his expression, but that's one that will go right up there with telling Russell Wilson last year, hey, stop kissing all the babies.
Yeah.
You're not running for anything.
The idea that
Stop kissing the babies.
He's sort of claiming his territories all around the Denver Broncos. And there is no question that Sean Payton is the unquestioned leader of this program. That the first year, maybe there was a feeling that it needed to be established. I don't really know why that would have been the case. And maybe it was because of Russell Wilson's career, a guy that hadn't had to sit out a year, even though his career obviously took a nosedive with the first year under Nathaniel Hackett and got better from the second year under Payton. But it is kind of fascinating to see how that all shakes out, because he does seem maybe a little more comfortable with a new reality. And that for the Denver Broncos can be nothing but good. One of the features of that new reality, though, is the fact that his receiver that led the team in touchdowns on an offense that wasn't very good, sixth in the league in touchdowns, one of only 6 players with 10 touchdowns, is Courtland Sutton. Yesterday, we had an opportunity to hear from Courtland Sutton, who multiple times talked about the term stalemate when it came to his contract situation. Payton alluded to it before minicamp, talking about how Sutton would be there, but indicating the problem wasn't that he didn't like their new uniforms. He addressed the Sutton situation again.
I think this is important, and Courtland and I met this morning for quite a while. We have a good relationship. He's important to what we're doing, and look, he didn't have to visit with the media. I told him, it's up to you if you want to do it, and so to his credit, he did, and so I would say he's important, and I think he knows that.
Couple things there.
Speaking of running for office,
it's interesting
was talking.
that Sean Payton said to Courtland Sutton, you can speak to the media if you want to.
And we knew it.
Last year, there was a very tight leash on players and what they could say and where they could go. Remember, Payton said, I don't want to see players out during the season on the social circuit. Remember that quote?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And remember where the media was situated? Not that this is a big deal, for training camp last year, up on top of the burn.
Right.
I mean, the people sitting on the hillside watching practice were closer to the field. That has changed. That has changed this year. Back to the way it once was, which doesn't exactly put the media in close proximity to the players practicing, but much closer and a clear vantage point. I thought Troy Rank made an interesting distinction in a Denver Post column the other day when he said, last year, it wasn't about dealing with the media for Sean Payton. It was about tolerating the media. And after reading a very good long feature piece by Nick Kosmider in The Athletic on the Penner-Walton ownership group this week, I think it was pretty apparent, because Penner brought it up himself, that he addressed things with Sean Payton. And I think one of those things possibly had to do with public relations. Mm-hmm. Say, you're our front man. You speak to the media every day. You can't be as hostile toward the media as you were last year, because hostility toward the media filters through and gets interpreted as hostility toward the fan base. Hey, I'm Sean Payton. I'm coming in here and I'll do anything I want to do, and I'll behave any way I want to behave.
And since missing the playoffs since 2015, you don't need to make the fan base anymore hostile.
I had to guess, and maybe I'm giving him more consideration than I should be, I think Greg Penner and Payton do talk, and I do think Payton has total control of the football operation. But Penner's run a large corporation, and he knows that public relations matter. Customer relations matter. And I know one question he asked last year to some business side executives was, why are the fans complaining so much about various things going on during the so-called game day experience at the stadium?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they being so critical? And it was very gently pointed out, it's Mr. Penner, it's because the team is losing and has been losing for years and years and years. If the team were winning, you'd notice many, many, many fewer complaints. And on the subject of allowing Sutton to speak to the media if he wanted to, clearly Cortland Sutton very much wanted to speak.
And Payton knew what he was going to talk about. And
Absolutely.
I think, again, that accelerates the process that I think will end up eventually.
But there's some plausible deniability for Payton there,
sure,
because he isn't directly involved in the contract negotiations.
Right. So that has.
Remember last year with Russell Wilson and the whole story about Wilson being bullied around mid-season about changing the terms in his contract, and Payton very eager to get out in front of that and say, that wasn't me. Mm-hmm. Even though it's hard to believe that he didn't know about it.
It's impossible to believe. But obviously things change, people evolve, people adapt, and we'll find out if that ends up being the case. So it will be an interesting offseason for the Broncos as they now hit the break with training camp next on the docket. We will look a little bit more into this as Alex Singleton, the Denver Broncos middle linebacker, and I say we'll get into that in a moment. You're thinking, wait a minute, don't they run certain alignments? It's and we'll explain why momentarily. But want to remind you that over the last 4 years, since online sports betting has been legal, you've probably heard all the ads, seen all the ads. You've probably memorized half of them, heard them in your sleep, because if you're watching sports, you're seeing ads for online sports betting. And it can be confusing. If you're thinking of maybe getting into it and enjoying a little bit of the fun with your friends, or just something you'd like to do for yourself, it can be confusing to find out all of the different ways that you can start. There's all sorts of offers. There are all sorts of sign-up bonuses, and it can be hard to keep track of them when you keep hearing them all the time. But we've tried over here at Mile High Sports to make it easier for you. We've gathered all of the best sign-up bonuses and offers, and we put them on one page on our website. All of it, no matter what kind it is. Bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches, everything. You name it, it's all in one place from all the sports books, everything that you can do that finds the best fit for you to jump into the online betting world, which might be different than somebody else's. So you can go through it, look at whichever book that you would like to partner with, whichever one gives you a deal, and maybe it's multiples as well. Maybe there's a couple different ones that mix and match for you. That works too. We make it easy for you, so it's easy to get to. Just go to milehighsports.com or download our free mobile app, and then go to Colorado Sports Betting and click it right atop the page. That will take you to all of the current offers, all of the latest and greatest. You can go through it in an easy to sort out way to find out what the best betting opportunity is for you, so you can jump in and have some of the fun. It's that simple. Think of it as your bonus from all of us here at Mile High Sports. Sandy, Alex Singleton over the last 2 years has 340 tackles in 34 games, hasn't missed a game. And for the Broncos, coming into the season in which he joined a couple years ago, joining Josey Jewell, sort of a curiosity, a guy that with the Eagles, undrafted out of Montana State, continued to work his way up, became part of special teams, really kind of a special teams demon, racked up a lot of tackles. And the Eagles kept trying him in more and more places as he seemed to be pretty adept at piling them up. The Broncos added him to maybe complement Josey Jewell. Well, Singleton's here. Jewell is gone. And you've pointed this out before when you're talking about the inside linebacker position, or however you want to term it nowadays. Because most teams play with the nickel as the base. The nickel is the base defense in the NFL. And anyone tells you otherwise hasn't been paying attention for about a decade now. You really start 3 corners and 1 inside linebacker. So Singleton is the guy. Even though there are alignments in which you might have 2, it's really just him. The role has changed as well. Very few of those guys actually go out covering tight ends, but you still need to do it. Singleton's job, and when it's talking about getting tackles, he's great at that. But do the Broncos need more? When you look at the ascension of Singleton over the last couple of seasons, what do you see from a player who is, by any way you slice it, been self-made?
I want to say this in a way that doesn't sound more harsh than I really intended to sound. I think there's a place for Alex Singleton or a player like him on most any team. But as you initially suggested, that place most probably on very good to excellent teams, playoff caliber teams, would be as a special teams demon who would play every now and then from the line of scrimmage, but wouldn't play nearly as often as he plays for the Broncos, and especially in third down situations. He would never be on the field on a good team. He'd be a first down, maybe a second down player, although now in the NFL, they're all passing downs, aren't they, pretty much?
Yep.
Maybe first down, less so, but
Slightly.
even on first down, it's a very slight difference between tendencies to run versus pass. And so I think that while he's a productive player, it reminds me of the old bromine. Even bad teams have best players. Now, I think Patrick Surtain and before him last year, Justin Simmons were the two best players in the Bronco defense. But to say Alex Singleton was probably no worse than the third best player in the Bronco defense would not be inaccurate. But I think maybe on first down, second down, he'd be adequate. On a bad team, though, he's got too much to do. And many of the tackles
that's
he
an
makes,
interesting
because their interior linemen up till now have not been able to draw double teams all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting blocked. And so, yes, he's good in pursuit, but many of his tackles take place 5 or more yards beyond the line of scrimmage. That's just a fact. Makes a lot of tackles. His tackle numbers have increased every year. He is not a bad player. He is on a bad team, maybe one of the top 5 players on the team
and that
overall, and that shouldn't be. And I don't think Alex Singleton would believe that on a championship caliber team, even a playoff caliber team, that he'd be one of the 5 best players, even if he happened to play a fair amount.
The point you make is interesting because it's not really about Singleton, who is essentially doing everything he is asked to do. He is a sound, solid tackler. He wraps up. Guys don't break out at the tackles. For the most part, he was top 10 in the league. Tackle numbers have gone up every year he's been in the NFL. And the idea is less about maybe Singleton and more about the devaluation of that position. Much
I
like
think
we've
so.
seen
That
at
has
safety,
a lot
right?
to do with it.
As passing games push things to the edges, the idea that Justin Simmons, who was the Broncos' best player, period. Broncos just let him go. They waived him.
And no one signed him.
And he still doesn't have a job because the safety position has been devalued. The position that Singleton has also been devalued. And the expectation at this point is essentially just get the tackles you can get to, cover the middle of the field, and be ready to wrap up. And he's done exactly that. But he's also one of the guys that's been returning. He has done what the team has asked for them. He's outlasted the other guys that were in that role since he's come into town. And now back with the Broncos again for year number 3. He had a chance to talk at minicamp about taking on a bigger leadership role this season.
Yeah, I mean, first Josie leaving, I'm happy for him. He got a lot of money, so that's all you can ask for your friends. But yeah, it's obviously, different. I think, we shared it a lot last year and you just kind of back and forth. I think it's, now I, can step up and, take a bigger leadership role, not just in our room, but on the whole defense. And, with where we're at age-wise kind of on defense, I have to do that. And so, yeah, it's good. Enjoying it so far.
That job still usually comes with the green dot on the back of your helmet. And that should be Singleton's role this year. That's an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly can be fairly said that he knows the defense. He's played well in this defense. And, the expression, do your job, I think that fits Singleton.
And if you're Sean Payton, there's got to be something comforting about that, right?
He's where he's supposed to be, generally speaking. He's not out of position. And that is a must for any off-ball linebacker, Blair. You can't be out of position. And that's why, to me, it's so remarkable that a Micah Parsons down in Dallas can play all 4 linebacking spots. Heck, he can play on the defensive line, on the edge.
Possibly
not on the nose. And he could in certain coverages play effectively as a safety. And that's not Alex Singleton. And it's unfair to compare him to people like Parsons. He is not an elite player, but he's got some value on a young team because he's a veteran. He's been around for a couple of different, I guess 3, right? Didn't he come in with Fangio? Or am I mistaken?
No, it was just the last 2 years. So it was with
he did not come in with Fangio.
No,
Fangio's last year.
Correct.
This would be his third.
This is his third year with the Broncos.
So this is the second different coaching staff he's been a part of, and there are people on defense who've been around here for a while, who've been around for more, and I think he's capable of exercising some leadership, but he's not going to raise the level. He's not one of those guys, as the truly great players are, who lifts everyone around them to a higher standard. But he knows what he's doing. He's where he is supposed to be. He wears the green dot now. Jewel did before. And I think he's more than capable of fulfilling that responsibility.
I think there's value in a player, especially on a team that is rebuilding. I think there is value on a player that doesn't need a lot of coaching and is reliable. I get it. Maybe not a star, but reliable. And I guess my equivalent, and I get that it's slightly different. I'm comparing somewhat apples to oranges. But I look at a Denver Nuggets and I look at a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is never going to be the star of the team. He'll probably never be one of the top 3 players of the team, but he's reliable. He doesn't need coaching. He's where he's supposed to be. And when you have that consistent, sort of the Bill Belichick idea that instead of giving me a whole bunch of guys that, but on a 1 to 10 can be a 10 one week and a 3 another week, give me a bunch of 6s who I know are a 6 every single day, and I'll be able to win you a lot of football games. And I think Singleton's one of those guys that Belichick would have liked because I don't have to worry about him. I know what he's going to do. I know what his level of performance is going to be. I know what I'm going to get out of him. And I think there's value. But the idea of Singleton trying to get this team with with the other veterans too, trying to get them to a spot where they are more competitive. Remember, he left the Eagles just as the Eagles were on the rocket ship to the top. He did talk about the goals and how much better he believes the Broncos can be.
Yeah, we don't want to suck. I think that's most teams' goals. I think that's our plan is what we did early last year. There was obviously the Raider game. I think we could just have won that. The Commanders game. We should have shut them out. And, should have been a 35-10 game or whatever. And then obviously what happened after that. We win those 2. We're in the playoffs. There's no question. With how the rest of the season went. So I think defensively we know that we got to start hot. Whoever is going to play quarterback is going to be a younger guy in the system. So it's kind of. We know what we have to do, and we need to prepare. We have been preparing like that, and to come in to the rest of the summer knowing that, and get ready to win football games. Because we're gonna be better.
Was it Emmanuel Sanders who said a few years back, "We're living in a world of suck"?
Yep. They want to avoid that for sure. But Singleton is. But he makes some good points there when you're talking about at least that's the basic goal, just not be bad. And the second is, defense will have to step up. They'll have young quarterbacks. We'll find out as it comes along here. Broncos next get back at it at training camp. The Colorado Buffaloes will get back at it soon enough as well. And they put together a very impressive stat, not on the field, but off the field. We'll have a chance to talk about that and more with our friend Justin Adams from CBS News Colorado in a moment. But first, a message from Sandy, from our friends from Zaner Hart and Law.
No one ever plans to be part of a car accident, catastrophic event, major injury that you might sustain in an accident. But if you're in one, you don't want to be looking around for a long period of time for the right kind of attorney. You need the very best, and you need to call Zahner Hardin Law. Kurt Zahner, Mark Hardin, the types of lawyers you want handling your case. They're two of the most elite personal injury lawyers in Colorado and nationwide. They've won nearly every award: Trial Lawyer of the Year, $1 Million Advocates, Super Lawyers, Top 100 National Trial Lawyers. They've appeared in the Denver Post. They've appeared on local news outlets. They've gone on Good Morning America. They are the best. They handle the most important cases. They work to make this a safer community. And with multi-million-dollar verdicts and the respect of every insurance company, you're lucky to have Zahner and Hardin in your backyard. So if you've been involved in an auto accident, reach out to Zahner Hardin today at yourstorywillbetold.com. That's yourstorywillbetold.com.
Up in Boulder, the University of Colorado football team finished the spring 2024 semester with the second highest GPA in program history. CU as a university actually put up a great GPA for all of its student athletes this year. But for the last couple of semesters, the football team has taken a leap forward too. Joining us to talk about that and more is our friend Justin Adams from CBS News Colorado. Always a delight to talk to Justin, who knows of what he speaks when we talk about the University of Colorado football team. Played tight end there as well. And Justin, when you see you see numbers like that, and I get it that the season on the field did not end the way the Buffs wanted it to end, but it was a lot better than the one-win campaign not that long ago. And you see that the GPAs are also part of this. The idea that Deion Sanders is a complete mercenary, doesn't care about what happens, just getting these guys to the NFL and moving along, that may not entirely hold water, right?
No, not 100%. And guys, as always, thank you so much for having me on. But it's something that he shows that he cares. And in today's day in college football, let's be honest, it's not really about getting guys to the finish line of graduating. It's all about winning football games and keeping them out of trouble. I mean, you think about the transfer portal where so many guys can just, leave immediately, right? I mean, literally, you have student athletes that don't have to go and talk to their parents before they make the decision to go to another university. And so you have all these different things happening. And now you talk about what's going on in the classroom. A 3.1 GPA is truly impressive. And to get a group of guys from different backgrounds to not only excel, in the first part of the season on the field, but also to excel in the classroom is extremely impressive.
It is all of that. And Colorado should be very proud of the fact that, as Shawn mentioned, throughout its athletic department, the grades have been outstanding, well above the national average. And I've always thought it was a bit of a cliche to suggest that especially big-time programs, basketball, football, only involve kids who are trying to skate by with easy classes. They used to call them gut classes. That was a long time ago when I was going to school. But I think that's important. It's something he's talked about. And Deion Sanders gets criticized for talking about things that don't appear to manifest themselves as much in reality. In this case, as much as he's talked about education, the record backs him up.
It does. And it's one of the things that shows that his word is true in this sense, right? I mean, there are certain things that you cannot control. You cannot, for the most part, control what happens on the field. You could put guys in the proper position. You could make the right call. But for the most part, there's things that happen in the game that you cannot control. But to help out guys to make sure that they're held accountable, that's one of his things that he has, right? He talks about smart, tough, fast, discipline, right? Have guys with character, right? You want those type of individuals. Well, you cannot have those guys on the field if you're not doing your job in the classroom. And so it's great to see that he's doing it in his first season, by the way, guys. In his first season, where you have a whole new group of transfers that come in and say, hey, I know that you're new to this university, you're new to the culture, you're new to the campus, but guess what? You're not new to these books. You need to go and make sure that you're taking care of business. And it's great to see that those guys will be able to do so.
For the first time in history, the current cumulative GPA for the football team is over 3 ever. Chris Livingston is the director of academics and student success up in Boulder. And Livingston said specifically about Deion Sanders, he's heavily involved. We meet the position coaches every 2 weeks to give a progress report. Guys that are struggling are in Coach Prime's office immediately. And maybe one of the biggest examples of that, you think about the talent there is Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, of course, an extraordinary talent, cornerback, wide receiver, whatever he ends up being. Hunter was one of only 27 players in the country to be named first-team academic All-Americans. He's majoring in psychology and at a 3.64 GPA, folks. That's an A average, despite being maybe the most talented player on the team.
Maybe. You put a question mark? You better straighten that thing out. There's an explanation point. There's no maybe on that one. He is special. But you know what? 3.6 GPA. Truly tremendous to see him do that. But here's the thing also with these guys, right? There's so many different options for you to be able to succeed and also for you to be able to get away from different distractions, right? You have online classes. You're able to go and have a schedule that best suits you, right? I'm not saying that these guys are learning, but you are at a place where you are able to go and put yourself in a position to where you do well on the field, but also to where you could go and have your studies and do them well off the field too. And so with modern technology advances to be able to do different things like that, it helps out these guys. And I'll tell you this, the more and more we grow within these athletes, within the transfer portal, within everything that's going on, and you don't have to have guys go to the classroom and they can spend more time on the field, online classes are going to be that much more important for these athletes.
We're talking to Justin Adams of CBS News Colorado, and I originally said perhaps I was maybe giving some credit to Shedeur Sanders, but while we're on the subject of quarterbacks, of course, we haven't had a chance to talk to you in a little bit. Minicamp is over for the Denver Broncos. It does feel finally, I mean, we'll hear it time to time, that the idea that there's a quarterback competition brewing is finally going by the wayside. This is Bo Nix's team. He was brought in to be the quarterback. He is the QB1. No matter what they want to call it, and he will be the starter, presuming he's healthy. But when you look at Nix at this point, and obviously there's only so much you can glean from minicamp, what are your expectations for a rookie quarterback who was the 5th quarterback taken in the draft? Do you think he'll be the 5th best quarterback, or does he have to be a lot better than that for the Broncos to even be respectable?
Well, respectable. I mean, it's tough with the roster that they have right now. I mean, let's just be honest. We think about the Broncos. Who are the stars? When the Broncos play on national television later on this year, they play on Monday Night Football.
Right.
Who will be the player that they say, this player in the Denver Broncos? Because you could say it used to be Justin Simmons. Are you going to say Garrett Bowles? Will you say Cortland Sutton? I mean, like, who's the guy that you're going to sell?
Put Quinn Miners up there.
Yeah.
Even though Quinn Miners is their best offensive player, you can't put a guard up there as your best national TV.
Right, that's part of the point.
You're going to talk about one of his receivers. You're going to talk about the rookie running back, Estime from Notre Dame. Almost anybody except an offensive lineman. And that's what
exactly
we about Alex Singleton a few minutes ago in that context. Alex Singleton was probably no worse than the 3rd best defensive player last year. But if he's your 3rd best defensive player, you're probably not very good. And that's not a knock at Alex Singleton. He does what he does. He'd be an exceptional full-time special teams player on good teams. He'd play every now and then. He'd be a depth guy from the line of scrimmage. But the fact that he's a standout here, and I'm not talking about leadership. He's more than capable of exercising that. He's been around. This is his 3rd year here. But I'm talking about the idea that in terms of star power, you don't identify Singleton that way. You don't identify Bowles that way. I think Miners will maybe even this year get to a point where he's a legitimate Pro Bowl, maybe even All-Pro consideration. He's probably one of the 5 or 6 best guards in the league, but he's not going to break games open for you.
Bingo. And that's the point when you talk about Bo Nix.
Right.
Right. But that's the point with Bo Nix, right? We're not talking about like what Caleb Williams has, for example. He has pieces. He doesn't have pieces. He has pieces around him. He should be a guy that has at least 25 touchdown passes as a rookie. For Bo Nix, I would be happy if he has 15 to 20 touchdown passes. Give me 15 to 20. Keep the interceptions in single digits. You might creep up to 11 and 12. Let's see you get 10 starts and go from there. I just want to see you be a competent quarterback out there. I want you to see you throw the ball over the middle of the field, right? I want you to see you get the ball to your stars. What happens on third down and long? Can you be able to do it? Can I get a couple of games where you do bring a team back where you're down by 3, down by 7, right? Can I see that type of explosiveness from you? That's what I'm looking at, and that's the way that we should evaluate Bo Nix this season.
I noticed you said 10 starts. It seems you might not be quite as convinced that he'll start on opening day as the two of us are.
I don't see the reason why he should start on opening day, to be honest with you. You're telling me that you want him to go to Seattle? The first game you want him to be at is at Seattle in that environment. Why don't you have him at home? Why don't you have him in a place where he's more comfortable? I'm a guy who is okay with your first round quarterback having a couple of games where he sits back and learns, having a couple of games where he's able to go and understand the defense from week to week, right? To be able to go and help out his team, to be able to go through practices, to be able to go through the ups and downs of a season. I don't believe he has to start all 17 games for you to get a proper evaluation of what he could be. I believe you can find out in 10 games, because we all know in the NFL, it takes 6 games where you can find out the book on a quarterback for the most part. For Bo Nix, give me 10 games. Give me 10 games to see what this young man could do. If we get some more, that is icing on the cake, right? But I got to see at least 10 games to see what he could do on the field.
I think I'm kind of saying I'm a little surprised to hear that, because I guess I don't know how much better you can get watching. But on top of that, we are talking about a guy that's an older quarterback coming into the league. No one started more college games in his career. They went to the college football playoff this year. They play in a pretty rowdy stadium as well, with some big rivalries. I'm not sure that if the moment's too big for Bo Nix, that might be a problem in and of itself. I think part of the reason you pick him is because he's a more mature guy that's supposed to be ready for this, right?
Well, you can make the case, right, that Carson Palmer should have been ready, right? Or Patrick Mahomes should have been ready. Or how many other great quarterbacks that we have seen that should have been ready immediately. Or, hey, Sandy, you know this, John Elway, he should have been ready right out the gate, right? One of the best quarterback prospects we've ever seen. Didn't start his first game, unless it's something I don't know, right?
But yes, he did, though. I mean, I know he got benched. I was there for the second game in Baltimore. He started in Pittsburgh. Didn't play well. DeBerg came on late, and they won the game. The second week in Baltimore, I was there.
Yes, you're right.
DeBerg again came off the bench, threw a long pass to Steve Watson at the end of the game, help him hold on and win there. Yes, and he was benched during the course of the year, but then DeBerg got hurt, and Elway came back, and Elway was the guy who got him into the playoffs. And that's 41 years ago, though. And I think even with Patrick Mahomes, the situation is a little bit different there. They were division champions. They were turning into a dominant
with an established
team. And they had the
quarterback,
luxury of taking Alex Smith, who led the league in passer rating. They had the luxury of playing him until the very end of the season when they had already clinched first place. And that's when Patrick Mahomes got his first start here in Denver against the Broncos, as a matter of fact. But then in the offseason, they traded Alex Smith. Coming off an excellent year, they traded him because they knew it was time for Mahomes, and it could have been time his rookie year too. They just didn't feel the need to force it. I have to say, I do think they need to force it.
Okay.
And the way they've talked about him as someone who has virtually memorized the offense and did so even before they drafted him. Penner saying today in a piece in The Athletic by Nick Kosmider that, we knew 2 months before the draft we were drafting Bo Nix. We all knew that. We
knew that here too.
You don't talk that way about somebody
right
going to sit on the bench and, going into Seattle. It's not going into Arrowhead on opening night, let's say on a Thursday night. That I could see. Okay, maybe you'd want Stidham. Even for the first 2 or 3 games, you'd want Stidham playing. But my thing is, Stidham played the last 2 games last year. What's the point of playing him again? Who he is.
Well, Stidham was hard garbage. Yeah, Stidham was hard garbage. I think you bring up a different point, though. And here's my point here is that are we bringing in Bo Nix because he's actually ready to go, or is it because that the other options are really bad? I mean, you bring up the
A
Alex
little
Smith,
bit of
right?
both, and Payton said that a few weeks
Yeah.
ago. He said it's not as if we have a lot of established people at that position. I think that was the very reason they chose Nix, and they wanted Nix, even if they had an earlier pick. I'm not saying they would have drafted him ahead of Caleb Williams
Or Jalen Daniels.
or even Daniels, but I'm telling you, they'd have drafted him ahead of May. They'd have drafted him ahead of Penix. They obviously were prepared to draft him ahead of McCarthy if they had to. And even Payton said it during the draft. That old McCarthy thing, we fooled all you guys. That was a smoke.
Right.
We never had any
Right.
interest.
My thing is this, though. If you're going to make that decision and that's the route you're going to go, you got to make sure that you protect him. You got to make sure that you have some extra help. You get your tight ends in, right? You go and play 2 tight, 1 tight, whatever you could do, but you got to make sure that you protect him. I would like to see the Broncos do something similar to what Philadelphia did with Jalen Hurts and his growth. Got to keep him under 25 attempts. Don't have him go over that number. Not a lot. Keep him under 25 attempts and rely on your running game. Put him in the best position to be able to succeed. Look, things are a lot easier with a nice running game and when you're dealing with 2nd down and 7 and not 2nd down and 10 or 2nd down and 11, right? You want to put him in the best position to succeed. If that's what you're going to do, and we just made the point earlier that you don't have the offensive firepower all over the place on your roster, if that's what you're going to do, then make sure that you protect him because you don't want to hurt Bo Nix today, this season, hurt his growth this season, when you finally are able to go and get away from that dead cap with Russell Wilson and add more pieces later on. You want to make sure that he is slowly growing and getting better as your quarterback so that once you are able to add all the pieces that you can, you're ready to fire on all cylinders.
He is Justin Adams. Make sure you check him out at CBS News Colorado, where you can find him regularly all the time over there. It's a terrific opportunity to talk to you, Justin. And I know we'll have to catch up with you have thoughts on the Nuggets. And as we get closer to the draft and free agency, we'll have to have you back about that one as well, because they have a lot of things that they have to do too. But we really appreciate the time. Enjoy your weekend, and we hope to catch you soon.
Fellas, always a blessing. Thank you so much. Be blessed.
Thanks so much, Justin Adams, joining us from CBS News Colorado. And it's the thing with Bo Nix, I think, is interesting, and it's not as if Justin isn't bringing up good points. I think the challenge, of course, and as we kind of went back and forth, is the Broncos don't have the luxury of anybody better. Bo Nix is probably the best quarterback they have in camp right now. There's no one to sit behind because he's the best guy, and that makes things difficult. And it does mean you probably have to, as you point, you probably do have to rush it. There's no other way around it.
You have to force it. Maybe a little bit. And you have to go through growing pains. Even the 83 Broncos were a little different. They weren't a team that had missed out on the playoffs for 8 straight years. If you're going to talk about a young team and how excited you are about a young team, but you say your 24-year-old rookie quarterback can't start the season,
right?
You're doing one thing and saying something else entirely.
Yeah.
And the Broncos have been guilty of too much spin. I'm getting a sense now that fans are fed up with that once and for all. And this is most all fans. I'm reading some of the comments in the posts below even Cosmider's piece on the owners today. Go back to Vic Fangio. Don't tell me. Show me.
Yeah, that's obviously what the Broncos have to do. It's also, we talked about the CU Buffaloes, who have been at least showing out in the classroom. They will join the Big 12 in just a couple of weeks here. That is, if it remains the Big 12. I'll explain in a moment, but I want to remind you that if you're looking to buy a home in Colorado, it is tricky. The Colorado home market's been crazy for years. It is difficult to navigate. So let me relay you to our friends, Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team, because they can make it a lot easier for you. Right now, when you're talking about buying in Colorado, it is very difficult. There's highs, there are lows. There's a lot more highs than lows. And that means you have to know the right opportunity to jump in. And you want people with experience. And those people with experience, you'd want to know they've been here for a while. Well, Key Real Estate Group has been 25 years in the same offices. You know, they're stable. The experience, of course, comes with that as well. And when I say Colorado's luxury home team, I don't mean it's a luxury home. I mean, it's the luxury service you get. Condos to castles, you'll talk to Dave and Mark. They're privately held. Like I said, you're not dealing with some big corporation that'll just send you whatever agent happens to be on call. You get the people that run the show. The Fed's still expected to lower interest rates in 2024. So beat that competition as it starts to warm up out here in Colorado and buy your new home before the frenzy returns in full to Denver. Maybe you're even thinking of a new build as home builders are trying to catch up with demand, and they're offering incentives as well. But they don't have to offer all the incentives because we know homes sell quickly. So you want to make sure you're even represented there so you get all the incentives and everything you deserve. So let Dave and Mark represent you to make sure you're getting all of those things you deserve. Here's how you get a hold of them. Call Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group today at 720-900-LIST. That's 720-900-LIST, or visit them online at keyrealestategroup.com. Sandy, as we went up to Boulder for a little bit with Justin Adams, the Big 12 finds itself in the news. Now, it is expanding as well. Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah will all be joining on July 1st. They will officially join the conference. Now, what does that mean for them? You know, we'll find out athletically what improves because they're in a better conference. Obviously, the Pac-12 disassembled itself, collapsed under its own weight, for lack of a better term, and revenue had a lot to do with that. Reports starting with ESPN and CBS were that the Big 12 now is looking into a private equity funding source. Now, the Florida State University was the first university that went into that directly, that started looking at it. Here's what the reports are that the Big 12 and its president, Brett Yormark, have been trying to do. Yormark's been very aggressive in trying to bridge the gap between the Big 12, which has 16 members, and the Big 10, which has 12 members or 14 members. It's not 10. And the SEC, which
so
the gap
we'll
between
have 14,
those,
right?
Right. We'll have 14. So even those names, a little bit confusing, but they're trying to close that gap. And the way they've looked at doing it now is apparently talking with CVC Capital Partners to purchase as much as 20% of the Big 12 conference. Some of that would be the obvious stuff where you maybe look at renaming the conference. Instead of Big 12, it would just be the name of whoever they got to sponsor it. 12
selling
or hopefully
naming
16
rights.
selling naming rights. But even though it might add $1 billion to revenue, to a certain extent, that as private equity seems to take over the world, we've seen what private equity's done to the newspaper world. We've seen what private equity has done to a certain extent other parts of the media world. I get why it's there. I get why people want to pursue it. They hold vast sums of cash, but the piper always needs to get paid. And it feels to me as if, were I the Big 12, I'm not sure I want to be the first conference to dip my toes into that with those sharks.
But I think in the current environment, they may feel they have to. They may feel they have to keep up with, I think, with respect to both football and basketball, if you combine them, the two lead conferences are the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yes, and the revenue
and
bears
the Big
it out.
12
the
is
TV
on
rights
a
bear it
different
out.
level,
Mm-hmm.
Along with the ACC, for that matter. And the ACC has all kinds of internal challenges, all types of challenges right now, with the various schools looking to get out of the ACC or suggesting they might just go ahead and leave. I don't think the ACC's position is similar to what the Pac-12 faced in the last couple of years of its existence. But I think the Big 12 wants to separate itself somehow, and maybe it's ready to roll the dice.
Yeah, I think they understand you're not going to catch the SEC and the Big Ten. Those are the out of now the Power Four. There is sort of a zombie Pac-12 floating around there, and who knows how that's going to eventually take shape. But out of the now what's left of the Power Four, the pecking order is very straightforward because it is the SEC and then the Big Ten. And they're actually relatively close. And then some mix, depending on the way you look at it, is the Big 12 and the ACC. One of the Big 12 sources told ESPN that while some presidents on the universities there have some concern about joining a private equity, the quote was, every commercial opportunity the commissioner is bringing is a way to close the financial gap between the Big 12 and the SEC. The number one priority of the Big 12 is maintaining competitiveness. These opportunities potentially help. There is also the bills going around up in Washington right now of changing the way that maybe can players become employees. Can they not become employees? Is there going to be a pool that teams or programs that can pay out to their players that's going to be defined externally? All of these things are up in the air. That's obviously a very challenging landscape to face, especially when you're expanding by the way that the Big 12 is expanding. You're bringing in 4 new universities. And this landscape is so vastly different that my instinct says selling a part of your conference to a private equity firm that its motivations can be nebulous, or it can basically change with the wind, at any point in time. We've seen the private equity firms worry about investing in building things. We've seen private equity firms also invest and then strip it down to bits. We've seen that happen recently with Red Lobster, who watched his private equity firm, and we're talking about restaurants, but still watched his private equity firm basically buy all the land from under its restaurants.
Because the land's more valuable.
And then re-rent the land to its own restaurants.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, it's you're shuffling money around to change profit and loss. That, I think, becomes very complicated when you're talking about private funding of public universities. And that's where I look at this thing more than anything else and think we're getting into something that might be a little dangerous.
Well, we're definitely going away from what we were talking about with Justin Adams, aren't we? Colorado may be as good an academic institution as there is now, having returned to the Big 12. And it really doesn't matter. Well, it does not matter. That nothing to, I say it doesn't matter in the sense that the academic standing, the University of Colorado, had nothing to do with their readmittance to the Big 12.
No.
Had nothing to do with it.
Zero.
And it looked no further than Chuck Ninus, the former commissioner.
Make no mistake, the Big 12,
the Big 12,
they will talk about it as Colorado comes in. That will be something that they use as a talking point in the conference to say we're very concerned with student
Chuck
athletes.
Ninus in various columns recently. I saw one that I believe Shawn Keeler wrote, in which he quoted Chuck Ninus as saying, I was trying to change the media landscape with the College Football Association back in the 1980s and succeeded. Remember the old days where there was one game a week on, and now there are dozens
every
team's
on,
of
right?
games. Every team's
on
all the time. But he's made the statement more than once over the past year or two that with NIL and the transfer portal, education is secondary. Your standing as an educational institution is secondary. It's big business now.
It is big business, and it is about winning. And the question is, will schools be able to show? And maybe the funny part about this, and we talked about it, attaches to Colorado, as strangely as it sounds, if Deion Sanders wanted to get back and focus a little more on high school recruiting, perhaps, knowing that only a fraction of players ever go pro, perhaps all of a sudden the academics roll back to being a enticement for recruiting when you're talking to a lot of kids and their parents who realize maybe you're not going to make the pros. Maybe you need to make sure you get a good education.
But see, that's what he's selling, though. And that's where I'm not saying there's a contradiction, but there is a little bit of a mixed message that confuses me publicly, because the whole raison d'etre for bringing in all these NFL coaches,
trying to get guys to the pros,
is involved with the pledge that we'll do everything you can to get you to the NFL.
It is a fascinating place to be, obviously, right now. And when you're talking about the college landscape, I don't think anybody actually knows how this is all going to shake out. It is just sort of happening in real time and reacting. And you just hope that when these things tend to happen, the rich tend to be able to take advantage while the poor do not. And that's one of the reasons I think
haves and have-nots.
Right. And find a way to try to pursue and
you're
close
one or the other.
Colorado's back in the Big 12 because they thought it got their chances of being one of the halves a little bit closer, and maybe the private equity gets it a little closer. The question is, what price glory? I guess we will see. But it is, it's Friday. You're thinking about maybe getting a little bit hungry. What are you going to do for the night? What are you going to do for the weekend? Maybe you're thinking of planning a little bit. Maybe you don't want to cook. Well, Sandy's got a spot for you.
GB Fish and Chips, the best drinks, meat pies, and fish and chips this side of the pond. That's kind of an old-fashioned saying, but you know that Fish and Chips produces wonderful food. And yet, when it comes to catering, the combination of the two is irresistible. The best part of catering, of course, you don't have to do any work. You enjoy your party. GB and Fish and Chips does all the work. You can stop by any of their 4 metro locations or visit gbfishandchips.com and bring authentic fish and chips to your next gathering. And the weather is going to be a little nasty this weekend.
Here and there.
From what we say.
Maybe. Still been hot.
Normally it's going to be hot, but Fish and Chips is the place. And you can make contact with Fish and Chips by simply going to gbfishandchips.com.
Well, now I'm hungry, but we still have a show to do, and that's all right because the Colorado Rockies are amazingly not a joke here. We did the math. They're 500 in their last 32 games, 16 and 16. They now come into a spot, and granted, they're buried in the West. They are not going anywhere. They're buried in the playoff chase. They're not going anywhere. But what you're looking for in a lost season, again, is hope. They've been playing 500 ball now for more than a month, and now they have the biggest homestand of the year in front of them, a 10-game homestand with some winnable games. They have the Pirates coming in starting tonight, going for the weekend. Then they have Ford home versus the Dodgers. Maybe those are less winnable, but who knows? Coors Field.
The Dodgers aren't exactly setting the world on fire.
Not.
They just lost again to Texas last night, and they dropped all the way down to 42-28. That is a 600 winning percentage. That's fine, but the Dodgers were closer to 700 than 600 about a month ago. And as we outlined the other day, if you look over the last 5 weeks, give or take a day or two, at the National League West, there is nothing to choose among the 5 teams in the National League West.
Which is
virtually
amazing.
Nothing to choose. Dodgers, Padres, Giants, Diamondbacks, Rockies, they're all right around 500, maybe a little over, maybe a little under, but the Rockies are right smack dab in the middle of it. And if you want to divide the season into halves, we played, I think, about 10 weeks. First 5, not so great. First 5 weeks of the year, roughly 8-28. Last 5 weeks, 16-16.
Starting with that homestand they had back at the tail end of May when they had Philadelphia and Cleveland and surprisingly won both of those series. They won 4 out of 6 at that point, and they had won one in Oakland as well. At that stage, when they went in and then beat the Dodgers at the last day of May, they had then at that point looked pretty good, winning.
They had a winning month.
Right, 5 of 7 games. The problem is, ever since then, in that second game against the Dodgers to start this month, even though they're 16-16 in the last 32, they're 3-9 in their last 12. Now, some of that has to do with a lengthy road trip. Obviously, they just finished a 7-game road trip. Out of those 12 games, all but 3 of them were on the road. Unfortunately, those 3 at home against the Reds, they got swept. You have to wonder if that's anomalous, or if it is maybe a sign of the June swoon that the Rockies have regularly hit. They do have a lot of injuries. Now Brendan Rodgers added to that pile. But I guess I look at this, it's not a make or break homestand by any stretch because the team, again, is going nowhere. But you are on this month of overall good baseball, even though the last 2 weeks have been pretty rough. This feels like an opportunity for the Rockies if they can win 7 out of these 10 games. And that's going to be tough with the Dodgers coming in for 4. So maybe it's even 6. I don't know. But if you have a winning homestand and you walk out of this homestand, now we're talking about 42 games. And as long as you win more than you lose in this homestand, you'll have a winning record over 42 games. Winning record. That's a lot further advanced, I think, than people figured this team had, especially when you consider Chris Bryant is hurt. Nolan Jones is hurt. Herman Marquez was out, although they knew that. Senzatella was out, although they knew that. Kyle Freeland is out. Brendan Rodgers is out. These are a handful of the names the Rockies fans probably knew at all. And they're still playing over what might be a 42-game span, winning baseball. That's an actual opportunity to make a statement.
It would represent roughly a quarter of a season, right? If you're
Pretty
talking
close.
about right around May 9th through more or less the end of June.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this will wrap up June 23rd.
All right,
Sure.
All right. But on this homestand, you should be able to win 5 out of 10. And considering the opposition,
Certainly
I
win
think
5
it's
out of
reasonable
10.
to win 5 out of 10 and maintain that 500 pace. Again, the infuriating thing about this Rockies season is that if you had 30 wins rather than 24,
oh yeah,
you'd be right in the wild card mix. Yeah, you would be. I mean, you figure in the National League, Atlanta's going to be the lead team among those who aren't division leaders. But after that, the Rockies are right now 9.5 games behind the Giants, who would be, I believe, at the moment, the third wildcard team.
Despite the fact
that is not close.
Yeah,
but
despite the fact they're one game under.
They're 17 games out of first place. They're one of only 2 teams that's truly out of the race, as we discussed yesterday, for a wild card playoff berth. They're a National League team. They should be in better position than they're in. And then we could talk a lot about the possibility that they might be playing games in September in which they're at least mathematically alive, rather than spending September wondering if they're going to lose 100 games or not for a second straight year, something they had never done until last year. Believe it or not, as futile as most Rockies seasons have been, until last year, they had never lost 100 games. And this year, at the moment, they're on pace to lose 105, which would be an even worse record than they put together last year. So there are reasons to feel better about them. But when you look at the National League, 13 out of 15 teams have a chance to make the playoffs, and only 6 of those will actually make it. But there are 13 teams that can harbor realistic aspirations about at least playing meaningful games in the month of September.
The power rankings that ESPN puts together this week kind of fascinated me, because you point out the Dodgers record at 600. It's there's nothing wrong with that, but the Dodgers expected better. They were,
but they're
better.
slumping.
They are slumping. They're sitting in 5-5. I mean, right now as it stands, the Dodgers 5-5 in their last 10. So are the Padres. So are the Giants. The Diamondbacks are 6-4, and the Rockies are 3-7, as I pointed out, 3-9 in their last 12. But ESPN has them ranked with the Dodgers as the 4th best team in baseball. Okay, I guess, because it is sort of top heavy. But the Padres as 10th, they're only 2 games over 500. The Giants as 16th, they're 1 game under 500. Arizona as 17th, they're 3 under 500. And the Rockies all the way down at 28. So even the teams that were maybe even still living off of reputation are underachieving. But for the Rockies, still underwater at home, 13-17 record at home. Probably tough to get back to 500. You'd have to actually have a huge run there, but it seems like they need to nibble closer. It feels to me like wherever the Rockies end up, the one thing you'd like to see is at least have a winning home record, and they're going to
should be 42.
Yeah,
they're not asking for a lot. Well, 41.
Right, and
41 and 40 would.
You're going to have to claw your way back to that, and you'd like to see an opportunity to do this. One of the other things to think about too, and we've talked about potential trades. Elias Diaz seems like an easy trade candidate, and probably will be. That makes the most sense, and I think even the Rockies probably understand, with him likely leaving as a free agent at the end of the year, it's probably time to move on. I don't think a Brendan Rodgers trade is in the offing. I think they should trade Ryan McMahon, but I don't think they will. But the one that ESPN suggested that is interesting, I can't imagine the Rockies would be trading their best starting pitcher in Cal Quantrill. Quantrill is the only Rocky starter with a winning record. He's by far been their best pitcher. And the idea is he has a contract through 2025. Yes, he would probably get you a pretty good return from a contender, because he's pitched well in Coors Field for a bad Rockies team. If you're one of those teams that has had injuries to his pitching staff, let's say you're the Braves and you've lost Spencer Strider, you're thinking, well, okay, we can't get Strider back, but Quantrill's pitching great for the Rockies.
System.
And we have a system, and we can Quantrill for this year and next. Okay, we could do that, and maybe we're in a win now mode. We could go ahead and make that trade. If you were the Rockies and you had a good, controllable pitcher, now he is 29, for the next 2 seasons, is that the kind of pitcher you trade?
Yes.
You try to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yes. And now's the time
Rockies won't
to
do
be
it. You know
aggressive.
that.
But the Rockies never do.
They won't do that.
What they should do, what most any other organization would do. Now, the White Sox are in a different category. They're on a 62 Mets pace.
Yeah, it's
going to be a fire
52.
sale. Anybody they can possibly trade and get anything for, they will do it. But in the National League, other than Miami, I don't know. I think everybody else is going to be, apart from Miami, again, other than the Rockies, everybody else is going to be looking for that one additional starter, maybe a potential closer. Well, the Rockies don't have anything in that area to sell, right? Or anyone. Teams will be looking, more teams than usual will be looking for people like Quantrill. And I don't know how aware the Rockies are when it comes to potential opportunities and needs for other teams. You could trade Quantrill, in my opinion, to any one of about a dozen teams and get a decent return.
Sure. Because at this point, especially in the National League, he may be the difference maker when everyone's so tightly clumped together.
You bet.
And some of the teams that wouldn't be, like, for example, Elias Diaz, who's a free agent at the end of the year, there are a lot of teams knowing they would have Quantrill for this year and next.
Right.
That it opens it up. You're not talking about just the big money teams that are okay with rental players. All of a sudden, some of these teams that are on the periphery would look at it and say, okay, we could be in for that too. And more bidders equals a higher return for you. And the Rockies could do that. They almost certainly won't do that. Who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us. We will see. We'll find out.
Now, I know it's a different situation and certainly a market from a different league, but I look at the Boston Red Sox, and they're going to trade Kenley Jansen, who's still an effective closer, to one of these teams that may not be looking for a closer, but maybe they're looking for a 7th inning guy, an 8th inning guy, and they're going to get something from him because whether they like it in Boston or not, and in Boston, they think they should have contending teams every year and contending teams for championships, not just contending teams for playoff spots, because the Red Sox is currently constituted at right around 500. If in either league you're around 500, you're a contender for, if not a division title, then a wild card spot. They're going to trade Kenley Jansen. They're going to trade Tyler O'Neill, whose OPS is well over 800, maybe closer to 900, 800. As they can get something. They're rebuilding. They're concentrating on youth, and they think the same way in places like Toronto and Tampa Bay, in a very strong American League East, where the Yankees and Orioles are going to fight for first place, and everybody else is at least 13 games out of first place at the moment. But Boston and Toronto and Tampa Bay will all be looking for people who are similar, if not identical, to those the Rockies have right now.
Yeah.
And the Rockies ought to jump on that chance.
They actually have players that could be impactful for a lot of contenders. When you think about Diaz and McMahon and Quantrill, these are players that could be difference makers for actual contending teams. And that's when you get the most out of it. So we'll find out. The 10-game homestand starts tonight against Pittsburgh. We will see what the Rockies do and have an opportunity to continue their play that has been, quite frankly, a little bit surprising. It's not amazing. 500 is 500, but it's gotten better. And can they continue that momentum? We will see. They get a nice long homestand, the longest of the season, starting this evening. We'll get into the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals in just a moment, and what maybe these one-sided series mean for each of those leagues. But as the summer is upon us, at least certainly feels like it, and the weather is nice, you're thinking of maybe the weekend, and you're thinking of playing a little bit of golf. I know I'm thinking about it too, and I apologize in advance to all the greenskeepers who just got to cold shiver up their back thinking that, oh, Lord, here comes Shawn trying to play golf again. But if it's time for you to get out and play golf, the city of Denver has the perfect golf pass for you, whether you're just getting started or if you've played for decades. A lot of different opportunities to get people into the sport of golf or improve your game. Practice and play passes for those new to the game to practice what they've learned and then transition it to the golf course. The Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is geared toward adult beginners, people who have never held a club, or players that are looking to advance their game. And that's probably a lot of people out there. Maybe you had a chance to look at golf courses and think that seems like a lot of fun, but everyone already knows how to play, and I don't. The Learn and Play Pass is perfect for you. If you've been playing for a while, then step it up one notch. Go to the Learn and Play Pass 2.0, which is designed to be flexible for intermediate players looking to improve and fine-tune their game. Or if you're just looking to get out there and have some fun, the Friends and Family Pass lets you play mini golf or hit the driving range. You can bring up to 3 guests with you every single time. So with 8 unique courses and opportunities for all skill levels, Denver Golf is perfect for just about everyone. So you want to learn more about everything that Denver Golf has to offer, visit cityofdenver.golf.com. Come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course. Sandy, last night the Stanley Cup Finals moved to within 1 game of a sweep, and we'll get to that in a moment, because obviously tonight will be the game in which I believe ends the NBA Finals. So we'll start there. Boston Celtics up 3-0. Luka Doncic ejected from the last game after his 6th foul. Doncic is playing, not hurt, but injured. And I think that's obvious. Now, are there issues with his game? Yes. Are there things he needs to get better at? Yes. Is part of it upstairs? Also, yes. But he is injured. And the Celtics are going to, I believe, in fact, I feel extraordinarily confident about it. I think Dallas knows they're beat. I think Boston beats them tonight. I think Luka's worn out. I think Kyrie Irving will shoot as much as he can to try to keep them in it. But in the end, I think the Celtics win this game and they sweep the series. When you look at what happened in this NBA landscape this year, the Celtics had a pretty well paved path to the finals. And by the time they get to the finals, regardless of what you think about the Mavericks, Doncic was already pretty beat up. The Denver Nuggets ran out of gas. They were too exhausted to compete. The Minnesota Timberwolves, despite their depth, had their issues as things went along. The Philadelphia 76ers had issues with their injuries as well. So did Minnesota. So did Milwaukee with their injuries. So did the New York Knicks. Does this finals, and let's say it ends in a sweep, hypothetically, or even it doesn't, maybe the Mavericks push back tonight. The Celtics have a little bit of a human nature. They know they've got the series and they kind of put it on cruise control, and you get the quote unquote gentleman's sweep. Does this say anything about the NBA? Is the season too long? Is it too taxing? Are the playoffs too long? Or is this just one of those years where there are a lot of injuries? We're talking about the 6th different champion in a row. But it felt to me this year as if the NBA was kind of just tilted Boston's way because everybody else was so hurt. Is it a fluke? Or is there something wrong with the way the NBA is handling itself? Because maybe with the salary cap the way it is, and the Nuggets have to go heavy with their stars, you have to run those guys into the ground because the rest of your team isn't good enough. Or am I looking at all of this and saying, it's no big deal, it's a weird year, lots of injuries, and the Celtics are good, and that's just why we're getting this?
Yes.
Okay.
On all counts.
Oh, okay.
On all counts.
Okay. So I'm not entirely wrong. That's good.
You presented an either or proposition, and I'm saying yes to both. And remember a while back when we talked at length about whether the NBA is in the midst of an era of parity, or are they coming out of that era? And the evidence is strong, I think, in both directions. 6 different champions in 6 years proves one side of the proposition, or suggests strongly that we're still in an age of parity. Mm-hmm. The last team that talked about a dynasty went out and didn't even reach the conference finals this year. That would have been Denver. Boston, I guarantee you, even if the Celtics themselves don't do it, there will be people who say, hey, we're witnessing the flowering of a dynasty. with the Boston Celtics.
Yes.
6 conference finals in the last 8 years, 2 trips in the last 3 years to the NBA Finals, and finally the 18th NBA championship in the history of the Boston Celtics franchise, a storied franchise, the most successful franchise in the history of the National Basketball Association, which is roughly 75 years old, right? Exactly 75 years old. And so you can argue that we're in the midst of an age of parity, but also that Boston, maybe more so than any other recent champion. I mean, Golden State that was the end for Golden State.
Right.
I think people understood that. Even people in San Francisco understood that in 2022, the Warriors got a championship that I think when we look back 15, 20 years from now will be kind of the forgotten championship. The championships that are remembered are the 3 years out of 4 that they won, right? And then they lost in the finals in 22. They had, or 19 to Toronto. They had some bad years until 22, and then they rebounded. And that was, to me, kind of a wacky year. Phoenix was supposed to be good. The Nuggets were right there. But the Nuggets didn't have Murray and they didn't have Porter all year long. Phoenix kind of flopped, and you see where Phoenix is now. So I think you can argue in both cases that the NBA is in an interesting place right now. But I think this series, without sounding Pollyannish about it, I think this series has shown that Brad Stevens and even the head coach, who was being pilloried at this time last year for losing to the Miami Heat, right?
Yep.
The Heat had no business really in the NBA Finals. But what was the story? Oh, the Celtics had the best team, and they couldn't win a home game. They won, the last 2 out of 3 games in the series, or 3 out of 4 times at home in the series, they lost. Right? They lost Game 7 at home. And that Mazzulla had been out-coached. Well, now you see Mazzulla has grown this year in his second year, expecting championship celebrations after his first season, probably unrealistic. Look how long it took the Nuggets with a fine coach in Michael Malone to get to the finals. And once they got there, they knew what to do. But Brad Stevens isn't going to be executive of the year, I don't think, anytime soon. But, man, they had a championship caliber team last year, and they added Porzingis, and they added Holiday, and they were so strong this year that they could withstand for most of the playoffs, whether he plays tonight or not. For most of the playoffs, they've operated without Porzingis. And they've still been more than good enough, overwhelmingly good enough to win. So I'm leaning, if you ask me to choose between the two, I think we're coming out of an age of parity. I don't see anybody in the East, unless the Knicks are a lot healthier next year. Honestly, I think Milwaukee's on the downside. I think Philadelphia's on the downside, although if they make some maneuvers similar to what Boston did last year, and maybe Embiid will be healthier next year, maybe they can challenge Boston. But in the West, I think there are a lot of possibilities. And will the Nuggets be among those possibilities? Yes. But will they be the dominant force they were last year? No. Boston's going to be, going into the season, the favorite to win again. Yeah. And in a way that the Nuggets weren't this year. And the Nuggets had a great team last year. But sustaining greatness, even Boston had to add not just one piece, 2 pieces to its starting lineup, which is already pretty strong to begin with.
Yeah. Well, moving into the NHL, last night, the Florida Panthers, I said it on the show yesterday, if the Florida Panthers scored the first goal, the sweep's happening. Well, they did. And even though they had to withstand an Edmonton rally, I still think the sweep is happening. Alexander Barkov, who got cheap-shotted by Leon Draisaitl at the end of the last game, ended up coming back and gets the first star of the game with the goal and the assist. I think the Florida Panthers just have the Edmonton Oilers beat. And when I look at this, and I think there's going to be a sweep coming here too, I look at this as very different than the NBA. This to me is an example of a Florida team that is immaculately assembled.
Yes.
And was consistently good. And the idea of teams like the Edmonton Oilers with the luminous talent and 200 score point guys in McDavid and Draisaitl. McDavid's a generational talent, maybe the best pound for pound scorer since Wayne Gretzky. And that, you can think of everyone in between. That's a lot of guys. But teams that have to stack a line, and that included, quite frankly, the Colorado Avalanche, and kind of led to their demise too, find themselves in trouble with teams. The Dallas Stars were a team that had depth, could score a couple different ways and had depth. The Avalanche having a very good defense, but still didn't have the scoring depth. It seems that when you talk about a league that is going into maybe parity, the NHL is showing that star power is great, but a deeper, better team might be better, because I don't know if the average hockey fan would necessarily be able to pick Alexander Barkov out of a lineup.
And he's one of the best players in the league. He's one of the best 5 players in the league because he is such an extraordinary two-way.
They don't know who Sam Reinhart is.
No, he's a 50-goal scorer, but nobody knows. And part of this is the NHL's status, really,
right?
Because people don't know Hyman, who's a 50-goal scorer for Edmonton. They know McDavid. They may even know Draisaitl. But you're right. You look at the way these two teams have been assembled, and you've got a first line, at least last night for Florida, where nobody plays much more than 20 minutes.
No.
I mean, Barkov played 20:06, okay? Second line, Verhaeghe, Bennett, and Tkachuk, 17:06, 17:33, and 17:02. You look at Edmonton's second line, they got Corey Perry, and I understand they were mixing lines last night.
Right.
Corey Perry played up on the first line a little bit, but he only played 11 minutes, 25 seconds.
Yeah.
They play McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, and Draisaitl, and the other 8 forwards might as well be
who knows,
junior players.
And that gives the Panthers the
Or
edge
college
on
hockey
every other line. And so a little bit of scoring on those second and third lines for their opponents, I mean, they're going to have an advantage over the ones for Edmonton. And that's, I think, what we've seen. Obviously, better goaltending by Bobrovsky as well. But this Florida team, to my mind, I don't look at it and think that it's something really wrong with the formula of the NHL. Matter of fact, I think that building teams is really important. The concern, I think, looking forward for the Colorado Avalanche is making sure that they look a little bit more like Florida and not look like the Edmonton Oilers, because I think that can get you to a certain point, and then you're in trouble. But how about this for Edmonton? Connor McDavid, after 2 assists last night, has 3 points in the series. No Edmonton Oiler, besides McDavid, has more than a point.
And Draisaitl,
in 3 games.
Has no goals, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a disaster. He has 1 point as well.
1 point.
It's a mess. To my mind, this looks a little bit different. The Florida Panthers have been the best team, I think, for the majority of the year. That the team I picked before the season started. I think the sweep is coming. They're tremendous.
It's a defense wins championships, and Florida's the best defensive team in the league. They went from allowing 273 goals a year ago to only 200 goals this year, and Winnipeg allowed fewer than 200, and the Avalanche beat them. Florida's a better defensive team. And I think they have a better goaltender too in Bobrovsky. But the point is, they're just a defensive team. They've scored 3, 4, and 4 goals in a series. It's not,
and held Edmonton to 4 total goals.
Right. Even though they've been outshot. Last night they were out-hit. But they've controlled the play on special teams. Mm-hmm. They only had 1 power play last night, but they, again, killed off all of Edmonton's power play. 3 out of 3.
Unless I'm missing something, Edmonton's power play percentage is easy to calculate, right?
And they were talking last night about the 5-on-5 play and the forwards who have scored in 5-on-5 play in the series for Edmonton. Fogle scored that goal.
Right.
I think he was the first forward to score a goal. But it wasn't I don't think it was 5-on-5.
No, it's been a disaster. Obviously, Florida's very, very good. That game and I think in that case, maybe the sweep is coming. I mentioned it even yesterday before the game. That comes Saturday. But that's means that, on Monday, Sandy, when you and I are back at this, we could be talking about 2 different league champions. That could happen in a short span of time, which is good because the Denver Broncos are done till training camp. That's over. You got the Rockies. Learn to live with it. 10-game homestand coming up for them, an opportunity to continue a run of surprisingly good play. We'll have an opportunity to check that out Monday as well. Thanks to Justin Adams from CBS Colorado for joining us. Always great to talk to Justin and get his insight. Danny Bailey is the man who makes all of this work. Producer, director, the man of many, many, many hats. Most of them either correctly University of Colorado or Denver Nuggets flavored. But we'll have a chance to get back at this Monday as well. In the meantime, you have a very safe and happy weekend because we want you right back here. If you have an opportunity, you liked what you saw, go ahead and look at that button below. You click subscribe and you'll know every time that we're about to pop on with the topics beforehand as well. So make sure you check that out. However you caught the show, we appreciate you. He's Sandy Clough. I'm Shawn Drotar. This is Mile High Sports.